Today we're counting down 15 of the strangest, most unexpected, and most fascinating muscle cars Ford ever put its badge on. We're starting the list in Australia because that's where some of Ford's wildest experiments happened, and nothing proves that better than the 1971 Ford Falcon GTHO Phase 3, with only around 300 units ever produced. This car was built with a very specific purpose in mind, dominating the Bathurst 500, Australia's most prestigious touring car race. Ford Australia didn't build this for your average buyer. They built it for the track and then made just enough of them for the public to satisfy homologation rules. The result was one of the rarest and most purposeful factory muscle cars ever created. Under the hood sat a 351 cubic inch V8, producing 300 horsepower. Serious numbers for any era, but especially remarkable in a four-door sedan body. The Phase 3 could blast from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 6.4 seconds, which was a genuinely shocking figure for a car that looked like it could take the family to church on Sunday. The suspension was heavy-duty and purpose-built. The 4-speed manual transmission put the power firmly in the driver's hands, and the brakes were oversized to match the performance. Because what goes fast needs to stop fast too. Visually, Ford didn't hold back either. The bold electric blue paint, black racing stripes, and rear wing gave it an aggressive stance that made clear this wasn't a standard family car, and the interior offered a surprisingly thoughtful blend of sport and comfort. Black vinyl seats with wood trim, of all things. Strange? Absolutely. But the Phase 3 is one of those cars that earns every bit of its reputation as a genuine oddity and a genuine legend at the same time. Number 14. 1970 Ford Ranchero. What is the Ford Ranchero? Is it a car? Is it a truck? The honest answer is both, and that's exactly what makes it one of the most fascinating vehicles Ford ever produced. The Ranchero concept started out on Ford's compact Falcon platform back in the late 1950s, but by 1966 it had migrated to the larger Fairlane chassis. By 1970 it was riding on the Torino's body, and the transformation was remarkable. The front end was aggressive and properly muscular, but the rear opened up into a genuine cargo bed. And if you think that sounds strange, wait until you hear about the windshield, a steeply raked 57-degree slope that made the thing look like it was already going fast, even while sitting still in a parking lot. Ford offered the Ranchero in 4 flavors. The Squire came dressed with faux wood paneling, which sounds absolutely absurd on a car-truck hybrid. And yet it somehow worked in a ridiculous, lovably American kind of way. The GT model brought bold side stripes and a sportier personality. The 500 was a more straightforward, better-selling option. And then there was the base model for those who just wanted the thing without the drama. Engine options ranged from a sensible 6-cylinder all the way up to a 429 cubic inch V8, pushing 370 horsepower. With a shaker hood scoop, locking hood pins, and all the badges to match, the idea of a pickup truck with 400 horsepower and racing stripes is completely absurd and completely brilliant. The 1970 Ranchero is an American original, and there's genuinely nothing else like it. Now we arrive at one of the most controversial chapters in Mustang history, and honestly, one of the most controversial cars on this entire list, the 1978 Ford Mustang II King Cobra. The story starts with the 1973 oil crisis. Fuel prices spiked, regulations tightened, and Ford made a practical decision: shrink the Mustang, make it lighter, more efficient, more suited to the new reality of the road. That's a reasonable response to an economic crisis. The problem was what they built it on, the Ford Pinto platform. Yes, that Pinto, the car that became synonymous with corners cut in all the wrong places. The base Mustang II wasn't exactly setting enthusiasts' hearts on fire, but Ford tried to salvage things in 1978 with the King Cobra trim. The idea was to throw everything visually aggressive at the car and hope it looked like a proper muscle machine. Spoilers, louvers, stripes, and a massive Cobra decal sprawled across the hood. It was loud, theatrical, and completely over the top. But pop the hood, and the truth came out. The top engine option was a 302 cubic inch V8, making just 133 horsepower. To put that in context, the Cobra jets of the 1960s were producing 3 or 4 times that figure. The King Cobra could barely crack 104 miles per hour at its absolute limit. For a car wearing racing decals and calling itself a Cobra, that was an embarrassing number. Ford sold just over 4,000 King Cobra units before quietly retiring the whole concept and moving on to the Fox body generation. The King Cobra is a fascinating cautionary tale, a car that tried to look the part without being able to play it. Number 12. 1974 Ford Gran Torino. The 1974 Gran Torino is a car defined by contradiction, big, bold, handsome, and significantly less powerful than it had any right to be. Earlier generations of the Torino had been genuine performance machines, but by 1974, stricter emissions regulations had taken a serious toll. The 452 cubic inch V8 that in better days might have cracked 400 horsepower was now producing just 220 horsepower, hemmed in by the new rules of the road. The result was a car that needed almost 10 seconds to reach 60 miles per hour. Not exactly the performance you'd expect from a vehicle this size and this presence. The 1974 model also brought noticeable exterior changes dictated by government safety standards. Larger, reinforced bumpers were required to survive low-speed impacts, which changed the car's proportions. The taillights became sleek wraparound rectangles, and the fuel filler was cleverly hidden behind a panel in the taillight section. A neat piece of design thinking in an otherwise constrained era. Higher-end Torino Brougham models even added a full-width reflective panel across the rear and a proper hood ornament for that upscale feel. The Gran Torino of 1974 isn't a muscle car in the traditional sense. It's more of a muscle car wearing a costume, all the visual presence of the genre without the performance to back it up. But it carried itself with dignity, and in an era when the muscle car was under serious threat, sometimes style was the only thing left to hold on to. Number 11. 1969 Ford Torino Talladega. Most muscle car fans can name the classics without hesitation, but the 1969 Ford Torino Talladega tends to get overlooked, which is a shame because it's one of the more technically interesting cars Ford ever produced. The Talladega's story begins on the NASCAR circuit, where Ford and Chrysler were locked in an all-out aerodynamic war. Each manufacturer was trying to build a car slippery enough to have an edge at top speed on the big super speedways, and the Talladega was Ford's answer. To qualify under NASCAR's homologation rules, they needed to produce at least 500 street-legal examples, so 502 were built. The starting point was the Torino Fastback, but Ford's engineers reworked the front end significantly, stretching the nose by 6 inches and creating a smoother, more tapered profile that cut through the air more efficiently than the standard model. The rocker panels were reshaped, a custom air dam was added, and the hood and rear tail panel were finished in black to give it a more serious, purposeful appearance. Under that sleek nose sat a 335 horsepower V8 producing 4 40-pound-feet of torque, capable of reaching 60 miles per hour in 6.6 seconds and topping out at a genuine 129 miles per hour. It wasn't the prettiest car of its era. Many consider it one of the stranger-looking muscle cars of the 1960s, but beauty was never really the point. The Talladega was built to win, and on the right track, it did exactly that. Number 10. 1970 Ford Torino GT Convertible. The 1970 Ford Torino GT Convertible is an interesting case study in muscle car identity. On paper, it ticks the right boxes: V8 engine, sporty trim, open-top driving. But spend a little time with its list of features and things start to get pleasantly strange. Start with the engine. A 316 cubic inch V8 delivering 220 horsepower and 300 pound-feet of torque, good for a top speed of around 119 miles per hour. That's decent rather than spectacular. Enough to be genuinely fun, not enough to be genuinely frightening. But the Torino GT wasn't really trying to be a pure performance machine. It was trying to be something else. A muscle car you could actually live with. Evidence? Air conditioning, power steering, power windows, hideaway headlights that fold away neatly behind a panel when not in use. These are the kind of features you'd find on a luxury cruiser, not a drag strip warrior. The Torino GT convertible blurred the line between muscle car and grand tourer. offering performance credentials alongside genuine comfort, a combination that was rarer than you'd think in this era. Throw in the vinyl bucket seats, the convertible top, and a color history that includes an unusual paint change from the original factory yellow to red somewhere along the way, and you've got a muscle car that refuses to be easily categorized. It's strange, it's comfortable, and it's far more interesting than it first appears. Number 9. 1969 Mercury Marauder X100. Mercury wasn't a brand typically associated with the muscle car scene. They were the comfortable, slightly upmarket side of the Ford family. But in 1969, they decided to wade into performance territory with the Marauder X100, and the result was one of the most unusual cars of the entire decade. From the front, the Marauder X100 wore a fairly conventional Mercury Marquis face, but from the rear and from certain angles, it looked like it had been designed by someone who'd spent a little too much time watching science fiction films. The enormous rear fenders and the flying buttress-style roofline gave it a dramatic, futuristic silhouette that felt completely out of place in 1969, and completely fascinating because of it. Underneath all that visual drama was a 429 cubic inch V8, making 360 horsepower and an extraordinary 480 pound-feet of torque at just 2,800 RPM. That's a serious amount of low-end pulling power for a car of this era, and it gave the Marauder X100 a distinctly different character from most muscle cars. More a loping, effortless bruiser than a screaming high-rev machine. About half of the X100s produced were fitted with a distinctive matte black tunnel roof treatment, giving them an even stranger, more dramatic look. The ones without it were painted in a single color throughout, which actually looked sleeker in a different way. Either configuration, this was a big, bizarre, deeply individual car, not something you'd easily mistake for anything else. Number 8. 1969 to 1970 Ford Mustang Boss 302. The Boss 302 is a Mustang that has always occupied a peculiar place in the performance hierarchy. On paper, it looked like a genuine racing machine. Up close, some of its choices were genuinely puzzling. The engine was a 302 cubic inch V8, fitted with large port cylinder heads borrowed from Ford's bigger Cleveland 351 motor. Combined with a solid lifter valve train and a massive 780 cubic feet per minute Holley carburetor, it was a high-revving, high-spirited unit, though Ford officially rated it at just 290 horsepower, conveniently matching Chevrolet's competing Z28. To protect the engine from overenthusiasm, Ford fitted a 6,000 RPM limiter, which was either cautious engineering or a missed opportunity depending on who you ask. The suspension was set up for cornering rather than straight-line speed, and in that regard, the Boss 302 was genuinely excellent. But in a drag race against a Z28, it came up short. It was a car built for a different kind of performance, more track day than quarter mile. Then there was the styling. A front spoiler was fitted, but the fender vents were blocked off. They looked functional, but weren't. The shaker hood scoop sat on top of the engine and vibrated theatrically with the motor, making everything look and sound more dramatic than the numbers suggested. Optional rear spoilers and backlight louvers added to the visual drama. The Boss 302 was a car of contrasts. Visually aggressive, mechanically capable in specific ways, and slightly misleading in others. Number 7. 1964 Ford Falcon Sprint. The 1964 Ford Falcon Sprint is a compact rear-wheel drive coupe that on the surface seems like a modest entry in the muscle car conversation. A 262 cubic inch V8 making 164 horsepower through a 4-speed manual. Respectable, but not earth-shattering. What makes it earn a spot on this list is everything else around it. The specific example that became something of a legend in the custom car world had a previous life as a Pro Street machine, fitted with massive 33-inch rear tires, aluminum tubs, ladder bars, and a Ford 302 engine with a performance camshaft. The result was a car that was built for short bursts of straight-line speed and not a lot else. Great for 50 yards, less so for everything after that. When a new owner took it on, the transformation was dramatic. The Pro Street hardware came out and was replaced with a Mustang 2-style independent front suspension, a custom rear subframe, a 4-link rear suspension, and a proper 9-inch differential. Modern 17-inch wheels and Willwood disc brakes completed the updated package. It became a car you could actually drive, not just launch in a straight line. But the strangest detail? The factory interior included a split-back bench seat rather than the bucket seats you'd expect from a Sprint performance model. It's a small thing, but it perfectly captures what makes the Falcon Sprint so interesting. A car full of unexpected decisions that somehow add up to something genuinely compelling. Number 6. 1968 Ford Cougar XR7G. In 1968, Ford's Mercury division decided to get creative with the Cougar lineup, and the result was a collection of trims so varied and unusual that it's hard to know where to start. The XR7G was one of the more restrained options. Taking inspiration from racing driver Dan Gurney's personal car, it came with signature decals, turbine-style wheel covers, and a chrome engine dress-up kit. Quirky, but manageable. The GTE model was a different story. Under its hood sat a 427 cubic inch V8 producing 390 horsepower, one of Ford's most powerful engines of the era, mated to a 3-speed automatic with quad exhaust outlets providing a soundtrack to match. But then, in April 1968, Ford swapped the 427 out for a 428 Cobra jet engine and added a 4-speed manual transmission option for those who wanted complete control. In the middle of a model year, just like that, the Cougar also gained an array of safety equipment that year: side marker lights, front shoulder belts, separate rear harnesses, and offered an electrically operated sunroof on any model in the lineup. Almost nobody ordered it, but it was there. The XR7 package added wood trim, improved gauges, toggle switches, and upgraded seats, giving the whole thing an oddly elegant quality. The 1968 Cougar was many things simultaneously: luxurious, sporty, safe, and thoroughly strange. It remains one of the more underappreciated muscle cars of the decade. Number 5. 1969 Mercury Cyclone Spoiler 2. The 1969 Cyclone Spoiler 2 was born directly out of the NASCAR aerodynamic wars between Ford and Chrysler, and it shows in every detail of its design. Mercury's entry into this battle started with the standard Cyclone Fastback, which was already a clean-looking car, but engineers extended the front end by 6 inches, grafting on a flush-mounted grille borrowed from the Ford Torino Talladega for improved aerodynamic performance at racing speeds. The rocker panels were reshaped and lowered, allowing the race versions to sit an inch closer to the ground within NASCAR regulations. Street versions came with a 351 cubic inch Windsor V8, making 290 horsepower, respectable enough, but paired with an automatic transmission and a bench seat that felt somewhat at odds with the car's aggressive aerodynamic bodywork. It was a strange combination: race car exterior, family sedan interior. 2 special paint schemes were offered, each named after a NASCAR driver. One for Dan Gurney in Presidential Blue and Wimbledon White, another for Cale Yarborough in Candy Apple Red with a white roof. Between 300 and 500 units were produced in total, making the Spoiler 2 a genuinely rare car with a very specific purpose. Whether that purpose needed a street-legal version is a question Ford and Mercury apparently never stopped to ask. Number 4. 1963 Ford Galaxy Lightweight. In 1963, Ford built 200 Galaxies for one reason and one reason only: to win drag races. Everything about the Lightweight was a calculated act of subtraction. The engine was the 427 cubic inch V8 with dual 4-barrel carburetors, producing a claimed 425 horsepower, though the real figure was almost certainly higher, but the power was only part of the story. To get the car down the quarter-mile as quickly as possible, Ford stripped away anything that added weight without adding speed. The steel body panels, front fenders, hood, trunk lid were replaced with fiberglass components. The front and rear bumpers were swapped for thin aluminum pieces. The interior was gutted. No radio, no clock, no armrests, no roof cross support. What remained was a pair of lightweight Bostrom bucket seats and rubber floor mats. The frame was lightened, sound deadening was eliminated, body seam sealers were left off, and even the side mirrors and backup lights were removed. A close ratio 4-speed transmission and a heavy-duty suspension handled the power delivery, while a 4.11 rear axle ratio maximized acceleration off the line. This was engineering with a single obsession: forward motion as quickly as physics allowed. The 1963 Galaxy Lightweight isn't a comfortable car, or a stylish car, or a car for ordinary roads. It's a racing machine that happened to have a VIN number. Number 3. 1973 Ford Falcon X BGT Hardtop. The Ford Falcon X BGT Hardtop of 1973 is another entry from Ford Australia, and another example of the company building something genuinely surprising under an unassuming exterior. The 351 cubic inch V8 under the hood produced around 300 horsepower and pushed the car to a top speed of approximately 132 miles per hour. Numbers that were exceptional for a full-size hardtop of that era. From the outside, nothing about it screamed performance. It looked like a large, capable sedan. That quiet confidence was part of the appeal. The mechanical story gets unusual quickly. The XBGT used a top-loader 4-speed gearbox, a transmission type that Ford was phasing out across most of its lineup at the time, making it an oddly retrograde choice for a new model. The 4-barrel carburetor configuration was even rarer. Only 21 examples were ever fitted with that specific setup, making an already uncommon car even harder to find in that form. Restoration of surviving XBGTs tends to turn up surprises, as many examples left the factory with substandard finishing work or pre-existing rust in poorly sealed areas. The fact that these cars have been carefully restored to their proper glory makes them all the more special. The XBGT is a muscle car that history nearly forgot, and enthusiasts have spent decades making sure it isn't. Number 2. 1964 Ford Thunderbolt. Don't let the ordinary appearance fool you. The 1964 Ford Fairlane Thunderbolt is one of the most deceptive vehicles in American automotive history. A car that looks like an everyday mid-size sedan and performs like a purpose-built racing machine. The secret was the engine, a 427 cubic inch V8 that officially produced 425 horsepower, though many believe the real output was somewhere closer to 500. Ford preferred not to draw too much attention to those numbers. The Thunderbolt used this engine to run the quarter mile in 11.8 seconds at 123 miles per hour. Figures that belong on a professional race car, not a family-sized sedan. 0 to 60 arrived in around 4.6 seconds, which was astonishing by the standards of any era, let alone 1964. To make all of this possible, Ford applied the same weight reduction philosophy that made the Galaxy Lightweight so effective. Fiberglass replaced steel for body panels, and the interior was stripped down to bare essentials. What resulted was an extremely light, extremely fast car, wearing a completely normal exterior. One of the Thunderbolt's most recognizable visual quirks involves the headlights. One headlight position on each side was often left empty, a result of the modifications made to accommodate the oversized engine. It's a subtle detail that marks the Thunderbolt as something extraordinary to anyone who knows what to look for. Most people drove past them without a second glance. That was entirely the point. And sitting at the top of the list is one of the most unlikely vehicles ever to carry a V8 engine, the 1970 Ford Capri Piranha. The Capri was a compact European sports car, light, nimble, designed for winding roads rather than straight-line speed. So when someone decided to stuff a 501 cubic inch V8 derived from the Mustang's Windsor engine into one, the result was something genuinely extraordinary. With a 4-barrel Holley carburetor feeding the engine, the Piranha produced around 281 horsepower. In a car of that size and weight, the effect was dramatic. To handle the power, a Borg-Warner limited slip differential was fitted along with an alloy bell housing and a custom-built, reinforced prop shaft, components you simply don't find in a standard European compact. The suspension was completely reworked with new coilovers and gas-adjustable shock absorbers. The braking system received upgraded discs and larger calipers up front, with additional rear suspension work to keep everything planted under hard acceleration. Inside, the Piranha balanced its Jekyll and Hyde personality with period-correct basket weave upholstery and custom Australian-imported carpeting, a curious luxury touch in a car built for performance. The engine was rebuilt from the ground up with new pistons, a revised camshaft, and a custom exhaust system that ensured the Piranha didn't just go fast, but announced itself appropriately. The Ford Capri Piranha is the ultimate expression of what makes this entire list so fascinating: the willingness to take something familiar and transform it into something no one expected. A small European car with an American heart. There's nothing else quite like it.